best of the Dan Le Batard Show with Stugotz.
Check.
Our favorite comedian, Leno annoys Letterman with a sandwich for laughs.
So honestly, thrilled to be doing this with you because I have admired your work. You are just such a sculptor. You're an artist as a comedian. It's sort of the
Why? Thank you.
Well, the craft of it. It's such a hard way to make a living, Jay. I don't even understand how you make a living that way. I really don't. You have to be demented to choose, you know what? I'm going to laugh my way to the top. I'm going to take the expectation of funny, and that's how I'm going to get rich. Get out of here. It's crazy.
It seems sort of second nature to me. You know, I think it's one of those things, if it's what you like to do, it just comes. You know, I remember when I was in college, I'm dyslexic, so I would get out of any sort of written things, and I was taking speech therapy. And I remember the professor said, now at the end of the class, each student will have to give a 20-minute talk. And people went, 20 minutes, oh my God, I get done. I thought, I'll do it right now. I'll talk for 20 minutes. Yeah, let's do this, you know. So it just struck me as funny.
But you could be funny in an instant? You knew that this was something?
No, not funny. I had to give a 20-minute talk. I mean, I didn't have a routine. I wasn't a comedian yet. But it just seemed natural. I mean, I always read that getting eaten by a shark and public speaking are the two things most people are afraid, you know, that kind of stuff.
But not you, right? Like that, you didn't need attention, right? An audience just didn't scare you, right? Even though you were dyslexic, even though...
No, it didn't scare me. It didn't scare. You know what's interesting? A lot of people don't realize, you remember the Smothers Brothers, right?
Yes.
Well, Tommy Smothers was dyslexic. And they were folk singers, but Tommy would get the songs wrong. Michael, boat the row ashore. No, it's row the what? And they made a part of their act. And that's kind of how they became a sort of funny comedy singing team, you know?
How do you watch stand-up comics? Because I imagine you are watching not just to laugh, but to see where the comic's insecure, where the comic looks off stage or looks at his feet. I imagine...
No, not really. I watch it just to enjoy it. You know, I like comedy. I enjoy watching comedians. You have to be careful when you're a comedian because someone does a joke and then you realize you never want to be on stage and that subject comes up and your mind immediately goes to that person. So you have to be careful not to try and take somebody else's material. You know, that's sort of the biggest trick. A lot of times you don't want to watch comedians do routine on a particular subject. Because if you're developing something along the same line, now you can't do yours because it's too close to theirs or whatever it might be. But no, I watch it. You know, it's like I like to make love, but I don't want to be a gynecologist. You know what I mean? So I enjoy it just being, you know, just being around it and being with comics. It's always fun.
You came up through the pipeline of where stand-up comedy was born, right? Like, I mean, you're almost at the roots, Jay. I mean, I don't know if it's Pryor and Carlin, but coming up through the LA comedy circuit, coming up through the comedians, when you were writing with David Letterman for JJ Walker, right? Like coming up through the Comedy Store. Right. Can you take me through the path of what you imagined your career was going to be and how it is that you arrived in? Like, I can't even imagine getting from there to the Tonight Show.
Well, I'm a huge believer in low self-esteem. I think it's the key to success. If you don't think you're the smartest person in the room, you're more likely to listen and pay attention. I mean, when I was doing the Tonight Show, I constantly meet people who are geniuses. People say, you know, my client is a genius, but the people at the network were afraid he'd be too good. You know, I get that all the time. Or I get comedians who audition for the Tonight Show, and they didn't quite have them. They were close, and their agent would say, you're scared because, you know, if my client kills, he could take your job. No, I want your client to do well. It's just that, you know, talking about Reagan's trip to Pittsburgh 30 years later, it's not really timely anymore, okay? Can you try to update the material? Oh, and then people get furious. So there's all sorts of reasons why. But I think the key is I was always happy at whatever level I was at. I mean, I used to have a day job and then be a comedian at night, and I would bank one and spend the other. And then when the comedian money got to be pretty good, I quit the other job. And I thought, I'm making a living as a comedian, because it's probably a sad reflection on our society, but the worst comedian in the world still makes more than the best teacher, which seems hardly fair, but that's just the way it is. And So I always was able to make a living, and it was okay. Each year got a little better than the year before, and that was okay. It's so funny. Whenever I watch these shows about, there's a couple of them on Netflix and HBO about comedians. It's a backbiting, horrible business, and everybody hates one another. And that wasn't the case at all. I mean, I got where I was thanks to Steve Martin and Johnny Carson and Harvey Korman. And consequently, when I got a little success, I brought Johnny Carson in to see Ellen DeGeneres and some other comedians as well. And you can't do every job every day. So I've always found comedians to be extremely supportive. Whenever one of us, by one of us, I mean Letterman or me or Seinfeld or even Robin Williams, if you watch my first Tonight Show from 1977, you hear this in the back laughing in the audience. It's Robin. Robin was sitting in the audience, kind of helping me out and giving me a little encouragement, And consequently, when those guys did the Tonight Shows, we all went and would laugh it up for them, whether it was Merv Griffin or, Mike Douglas or any of those shows. So it's actually quite a nice way to make a living. I mean, yes, there are horrible people in it, I suppose, but I didn't run into too many of them. I met far more nice people than bad people.
What do you regard as the happiest time in your professional life? Because I remember, I don't know how many times you appeared on Letterman. I remember a stand-up act specifically that for some reason, I don't know whether it was discovering you, I guess, but you were on stage and you did something about Mr. Universe and you held your fingers under your chin and you made, some other interplanetary weightlifter was furious because, we had decided that
I should have won. I got that bit, yeah. Something about how did Venus win? I should have won. It was how they have Mr. Universe. If there's the happiest time, yesterday was pretty good. But, the happiest time was probably when I was doing Letterman show every month. About every 4 weeks, I do a Letterman show. And it was the first time that I got to be on with a contemporary. Because like with Johnny Carson, like when it seemed, oh, hi, Mr. Carson, call me Johnny. Well, when you grow up in New England, you grow up, you don't call parents by their first name. Jay, these are my parents, Bob and Agnes. Oh, hi, Bob. No, I'm Mr. and Mrs. Minicelli. How are you? Nice to meet you. So to me, it was always weird doing Merv Griffin or Mike Douglas or any of those shows because I was talking to an adult and I was essentially a kid. And then finally, when Letterman got a show, I could want to go, hey, Dave, nice tie, Dave. What a dump this studio is. And just, trash, which you couldn't do with Johnny just out of respect or out of deference, So that was the most fun to me. And you really got a chance to be yourself. The fun thing about doing Letterman in those early days was making Letterman laugh on the way to the joke as opposed to the joke. Letterman was a guy who always got nervous before he went on stage. I didn't get nervous. So one day I was eating a sandwich and Letterman stops me and he goes, how can you eat that sandwich? You're on in 5 minutes. Get rid of that stupid sandwich. I said, oh, no. This is going to be great. So I went down and I got another meatball sandwich. It's an enormous, and I walked out and said, Dave, try this. And I put the sandwich on his desk and of course the meatballs getting all over everything. And Dave was just, acted flustered. And I said, Dave, try this meatball. I'm not eating that disgusting meatball. And we had so much fun because it was all ad-lib. And it was happening in the moment. So if I had to pick the most exciting part of my career, that was probably it. That whole 4-year period of just constantly doing Letterman all the time and going on, writing material literally the day before and then going on and doing it. So yeah, that would certainly be it.
I don't know if you've examined this because I regard you as someone who generally comes from a happier place with comedy or a better relationship with comedy, where Letterman seemed it was colder or that, he would be a little miserable or some of the negative feelings. He wasn't quite as comfortable ever. And it was part of his charm and funny, but you had a unique access to such a time in late night television where these cathedrals exist, and you elevated yourself into a place where you're telling me now as we talk that the Tonight Show and doing it, even though it was the greatest of ambitions, was somehow less fun than a time in television where you and Letterman could just screw around and not worry about anything.
Well, yeah, I mean, you kind of answer your own question. I mean, it's true. Where you can just be yourself and screw around. You know what's funny? Because when you start out in comedy, you go to the comedy club and you have your act down in your head and how you're going to do it, And then afterwards, all the comedians would go out to eat to one of the popular Cantors or a deli or something, and you'd get the big table, you'd order food, then you'd all sit around, you'd talk about the act and what was funny, what worked, and people would help you, you'd help them. But then something kind of interesting would happen. You'd find you had even funnier stories just riffing with the guys, and you realize, hey, I'm getting laughs here, but there's no punchline. There's no real ending to it. There's no beginning. It's just a funny story. And that's what was something I was able to bring the Letterman show, because before you sort of write joke, tell joke, get check, real simple, Whereas with Letterman, the fun was always on the way to the joke. I remember and I don't think I ever got to the team, but I went on Letterman show. Letterman, what did you get up to? I said, "Oh, Dave, I was out at the old Manson place the other day. Just want to see the guys, see what they've been up to since the massacre. It's kind of laying low." And the old Manson place, where you just, yeah, Dave, you know Charlie and the guy, and we're just talking like this, like as if they were, not horrible murderers, but and it was really funny, and people laughed, and there was no ending, there was no beginning. Oh, we just went to commercial.